you also need the people who are building systems so that things can continue to accelerate and not break.
Very resonant, and I think the reason that it went viral is it speaks.
I'm still not convinced, for example, that the foundation models and labs are actually good businesses.
Who is a human, who is not. And just because it's not a human doesn't mean that it's malicious traffic.
The way that the market talks about moats is very unsophisticated and ahistorical and overexcited. There are a lot of things that...
Hey all, Ed here from Persona. This is personally our Persona podcast. As you can tell, I'm in the New York outfit, very different setup, looking good. But I'm not going to be doing most of the hosting myself today. I actually have a couple of friends. And the next friend that I have with me is Ross. And he's going to have a really good time with Yoni, having a good conversation. So Ross, I'll leave this up to you now.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Ross. I'm the head of product growth at Persona. And I'm excited to have Yoni on the Persona podcast. Yoni, welcome.
Hi. I'm Yoni Rechtman. I'm a partner at Slow Ventures. We are a seed and pre-seed generalist fund. What I always say is I like investing in weird takes on important stories. I think I can find those basically anywhere. And I write a weekly newsletter every Friday for the last couple of years, and that is probably where, if anyone who's listening knows me, that's where they know me from.
Well, we'll definitely get to some of the things that you've written about, but maybe if we can start more personally.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to get into VC?
Oh, yeah. So when I was in undergrad, I had very kind of vague ideas about working in tech. And at the time, I sort of thought that there were three jobs at startups: founders, engineers, and investors. I had no concept of like sales or operations or anything like that. This was at the time, kind of the biggest companies that I really knew anything about were like Uber and like Facebook. And so, it really did feel like it was just like engineers. And so I knew, okay, well, I can't be a founder because I don't have any ideas. I can't be an engineer because I'm not a software engineer. So I have to be an investor. And without really knowing what that was or meant, really just like shockingly, naive at the time, hopefully endearingly, I sent a cold email to a VC who I had heard on this podcast, and I just thought he was like so smart and interesting and had a really kind of unique perspective on the world. This guy, Bradley Tusk, and I came in for an internship. While I was in undergrad. I wound up working for him for about 5 years, and I spent my senior year of college working full time. I had a 401k and health insurance, and then was like going to night classes at NYU.
You had a 401k in college?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. It was honestly, it was brutal because I was like 9 to 9. I literally would go to the office and then leave at like 5:30 and go to class at NYU from 6:30 to 9 p.m. 4 days a week, which was brutal. And I really couldn't do that again. And I would do all my homework on the weekends, but it was a ton of fun.
It's amazing.
And the whole time was like, oh, well, I'm going to do this and like find a job at a startup. And I just really wound up loving investing. And at this point, too old and washed up with no practical skills. So I really have very little to offer. So at this point now, like I burn the boats and I'm pretty pot committed to investing.
So I'm going to put myself in the position of someone who's a hypothetical founder. I need to raise money for a big idea that I have. Were I to go to Slow Ventures and to Yoni, why would I choose to take money from you?
Yeah, I honestly, I think maybe I'll start with all the reasons you wouldn't choose to take money from me.
I like that, the counter sell.
I think that there are types of founders who do not enjoy working with me because they do not value what I have to offer them. So I find that anyone who wants me to like basically know the answer to any question is going to be really unhappy working with me. I think anyone who is looking to me for, like brilliant, taste and product ideas is like going to be frustrated and disappointed. I think anyone who wants a cheerleader first and foremost, going to find me lacking. And so I find that there is definitely a type of founder who does not enjoy working with me. They don't really even enjoy talking to me in a pitch meeting. And I am fine with that. I think there's like a lot of, it takes all kinds. I find that there is a certain type of founder. They often skew either a little bit more experienced or inexperienced, but like very mature, who values and enjoys a couple of things that I think I offer. The first and foremost, just being honesty. I think it's Mark Twain says that he's dead. That didn't say anything anymore, but
rest in peace, Mark.
Yeah. Pouring out for the real homie, Mark Twain. I think it's Mark Twain. I think it's a Mark Twain quote about how it's just easier to tell the truth because you don't have to keep track of as many realities. I'm butchering the quote. Leave me alone in the YouTube comments, please. But I think just constitutionally or dispositionally, I'm not good at not saying the first thing that comes to mind. I think the second thing is what I always tell founders, I try and coach on decision making, not decisions. I just don't know. I'm not in the business. I'm not day to day in the company. I don't know the answer to anything. But what I think I can do and what I try to focus on is helping founders have better process around their decision making and ask better questions so that they can get to better answers. And so my role there is to try and be a thought partner, not to issue decrees by, diktat. And maybe the only place that I will ever speak with any authority in a founder's business is when it comes to raising capital. The best founders in the entire world might raise capital, 10 times each at 3 companies. So maybe 30 times in their whole life. And that's a month for me. So that's maybe the only place where I will ever say, hey, this is actually a domain of excellence for me. Otherwise, I think trying to be honest and patient and, keep an eye towards a limited set of important questions. And some people find that process with me to be really rewarding and useful. And those people I have great working relationships with. And frankly, there's also a whole category of founders for whom my money actually matters. We see it as pretty fundamental to our business that we want to back people who have either profiles or ideas that are sometimes hard to raise capital for, or a combination of profile and idea that are hard to raise capital for. And so sometimes it's just as simple as we're willing to take a risk that other people aren't. That's not the whole thing, and that's certainly not every time. But the people who enjoy working with me enjoy the process and the way that we try and solve problems together.
It makes sense. And I want to get into more of the specifics of your investing. But You mentioned that you write a lot. And I think we'd be remiss on this interview if we didn't talk about your X presence. So I really have 2 questions about it. The first is, how do you think about growing an X presence? And then,
I think if you're thinking, I think you're asking the wrong question.
Well, that's probably why you have an X presence and I don't.
And probably why I don't have, 100,000 followers or something. I have a small but mighty. I think that there is a ton. Look, first and foremost, I don't think that firms back people. I think that people back people and, partners back people. And so even if maybe all 4 of the partners at Slow are involved in an investment, I think they're each involved individually. And the firm is sort of just a shell or a wrapper that provides them, some back office and capital and a venue. And so I think that, people want to raise money to the extent that they want to raise money from me, they want to raise money from me because they want to raise money from me. And there's just no downside, I think, to being authentic and available to people. And all we really have are our ideas. And if the thing that I think I maybe have is a perspective on the world, I'd rather just put the perspective out there. And also, like, this shit is fun, and we wind up meeting really cool and interesting and funny people, and we can beat up ideas together. So I have gotten a ton out of being on the internet for the last 10 years. I was writing a newsletter. I've been writing a newsletter for about 10 years. I actually recently logged into Slack for the first time through my personal email, and I saw one of the Slacks that like I was in, and they were like, "Oh, do you want to like, add this one to this Slack instance or whatever?" Was the Substack First 100 Writers, which I had totally forgotten about.
You should add that to your title on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I tried to invest in Substack. I reached out to Hamish. Hamish, this is for you for, screwing me out of an angel investment. I reached out to Hamish and was like, "Hey man, like I want to put in," I was like, "I have no money. Can I put in $5,000? And he was just like, "Dude, absolutely not." They opened it up to writers a few years later, and I know a bunch of them did, but that was at like $1 billion valuation. I tried to do it at like a $25 million valuation.
You see alpha.
Yeah. I mean, didn't do anything about it, but yes. But yeah, it's really fun, I think, to just like try and expose ideas to Oxygen and like be in the mix with people. And like I said, being myself and available has almost always worked in my favor. I have the advantage of being at a firm that like doesn't super duper care if I'm, run the risk of saying something that's wrong or stupid, but like I never have, and everything I've ever said has been right. So it's really fine.
Well, on the topic of saying provocative things, and maybe you won't even agree with this characterization, you're known for a fairly viral post having to do with the four types of jobs in tech.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Are we gonna like put up the screenshot here, and we can,
if the technology is capable of that?
Yeah. What level of AGI do we need to be at to sort of put a screenshot in a podcast? I wrote this thing that there's four kinds of people, or there's really only four emergent functions, and they exist across orgs, and they exist across like domains. And it is a pattern that I'm starting to see, which is basically every role or every person within any role kind of decomposes into one of four things, which is slop cannons. So like do things quickly, be a generalist, use tools, reach for AI first. These are the people principally responsible for accelerating an organization. You'll see titles like product engineer, applied AI, PM, design engineer, all these. It's like, well, I don't know what any of these. I don't know what these jobs are, and they're kind of all new. And basically, the job is always just like do shit. And sometimes you'll see, by the way, the same people in sales and hiring. I spoke to one company. They said they're someone in their strategic finance org was spending the most money on Claude Code out of the entire company. That is a slop cannon. That's awesome.
And just to interject, actually, as I read it, I read slop cannon as pejorative, but you're not saying it pejoratively.
No. Slop cannon, parentheses, non-derogatory. On my GitHub, my like GitHub public profile, it says like, not an engineer, but I am a slop cannon, parentheses, non-derogatory. No, it is not a pejorative. It is not a pejorative. We actually hosted SlopCon a month ago in New York, where we brought probably like 100 self-described slop cannons together, and gave out prizes for things like most useless, most spammy, most useful. I think, we gave out like a Mac Mini. We gave out $2,000 in cash. We gave out RAM, just chips. It was great. Okay, so job number one, slop cannons, non-derogatory. Job number two, what I'll broadly call sort of like SREs. So like when the slop cannons are doing all the stuff to accelerate the organization and accumulating like a lot of technical debt in all kinds of orgs, in your sales org, in your product and engineering org, everywhere. You also need the people who are building systems so that things can continue to accelerate and not break. And so these are titles like security engineer and SRE and, infrastructure and all of this stuff. But you also, again, it's not just technical roles. These roles are everywhere. The third is adults. So if the first two roles are about accelerating, enabling acceleration, the third role is a governor. Adults whose job principally is to every once in a while just say like, come on, cut it out. No. You definitely need people like that in your finance and legal orgs, but they exist everywhere. Where like, if you're going to empower people to go and run really fast and do some wild stuff and be experimental, you also need to be able to cut and trim and stop those experiments from time to time. So accelerate, enable acceleration, and governor. And then the fourth role is hot people. There are many ways to be hot.
It's very progressive of you.
Elon Musk is the hottest person in the entire world. His number one superpower, and this, by the way, we can put up the shirtless photos of Elon here. Elon is the hottest person in the world. John Coogan and Jordi are also very hot, and they actually kind of do the same thing. And the reason why OpenAI paid $350 million for, or whatever they paid for TBPN, is the same reason why SpaceX is going to go public at $2 trillion. The job of hot people is to make a business like legible and exciting. And so Elon is able to get people to do things that they would never otherwise do. Like show up and work 100 hours and sleep in a factory, give him untold amounts of money for, let's call it, aggressive assumptions. Like obviously you're going to find hot people in sales and recruiting and CEOs, but you're going to find them all over the place. Like people need to be excited about what they're doing. They need to believe, and bending gravity and making people believe is extraordinarily important. So like, yeah, sometimes they're going to be like John and Jordi, who are awesome guys. I also tried to invest in TBPN. John and Jordi are obviously very, very good looking people, and it helps a lot. And shout out you guys. But they're also super charismatic. They're really passionate about what they talk about. And they've created this awesome venue that makes these big kind of complex, often pretty boring ideas feel exciting and relatable. They, I think, have done a phenomenal job at turning business stories into stories about the world and about people, and sort of elevated people as characters in that story. And so obviously there's a whole history of hiring hot people to do one role or another. But I think we do need to think a little bit more expansively about it. You don't you look good.
Oh, thanks, Yoni.
But I'd like to think, what are we doing here if not trying to do a little bit of sort of persona looks maxing?
Completely. No, but it was very resonant, and I think the reason that it went viral is it speaks in a humorous way to something that people who are participating in organizations or efforts that are succeeding. Yeah. It speaks to what's actually happening.
So there is this really real thing that's happening that I am definitely seeing across our portfolio companies and the founders I'm partnered with, which is in some of the newer, really AI native companies, the way that they are hiring and the type of talent they're looking for is meaningfully different. And I'm starting to see some companies think very differently and maybe a little bit more loosely about roles and org charts, where in some of these companies, everyone is 25, everyone is in Claude Code, everyone talks to customers, everyone is, everyone is shipping code, maybe not shipping core product into production, but they are shipping code, they are commercial. And we're just seeing the emergence of this much more kind of generalist, very, very high IQ, high velocity type of talent. And that feels really exciting. And I think harnessing that talent requires a different shape of an org chart. And it's why I think it will wind up being more organized around kind of dispositions than pure functional areas. So the iron triangle of design, product, and engineering maybe isn't super relevant when at least for kind of stuff at the application layer, like, I don't know, we can all sort of do it. And what matters more is like intuition and judgment and product thinking and, you know, customer proximity. And so like maybe you start building, you know, quads and pods out of a couple slop cannons, a hot person, like, you know, a couple slop cannons to like ship stuff and think about the product, a hot person to talk to the customer, an SRE to actually like make the thing scale, and like, you know, an adult making sure nobody you know, an adult managing a couple of pods and making sure that nobody goes down crazy rat holes and, you know, burns $1 million on tokens. Like that. And the role, who knows what the titles are, but the roles definitely do feel like they are starting to change, and we're seeing this emergent phenomenon. I think it's an open question as to whether or not organizations can scale that way, and like, is the, you know, what got you there might not get you there. But it just feels like a moment to be leaning into instead of out of the like emergent phenomenon of these kind of new spiky high velocity skill sets.
Totally. You know, Benedict Evans was just on Lenny's podcast, and he was characterizing this AI moment, whatever you want to call it, as 1997. What you're saying resonates, because I agree. Nobody knows the final shape of these things, but we all know it's profound. I promise that we'll get to investing, but just one more personal question for you. I'm curious what your ChatGPT moment was. And if I could define that, it's the moment when you went from, oh, this is cool, to, oh, this is profound and it's going to eat everything.
Man, that's a really good question. It honestly wasn't the release of, it probably was not the release of ChatGPT. I think we as a firm have been pretty on the record voicing a lot of skepticism about kind of the AI maximalism. I'm still not convinced, for example, that the foundation models and labs are actually good businesses. I think they're obviously good stocks. You know, they are worth a combined, whatever, $4 trillion. Even if you discount like the long tail of, you know, Neolabs and whatever, and actually way more than that, because I'm not even including, you know, Google's lab and, you know, Meta Superintelligence, whatever. So like just the independent labs businesses are probably worth $4 or $5 trillion. They're obviously good stocks. I'm not sure that they are good businesses. It seems not infeasible to me that they will never be able to generate cash flow, because they are going to be constantly training and forced to train bigger and bigger models to keep outrunning the risk of distillation from both, you know, mainly from China, and maybe from people sort of, you know, China and other open source providers. And between the, you know, compute costs and the inference costs on the larger and larger models like Mythos, it's not clear to me that they are actually ever going to be good businesses. Like they are CapEx heavy with extremely fast like depreciation on that CapEx.
So you're on the whole Michael Berry train.
You know, I don't know that like, I don't necessarily take as conspiratorial of a view as he does, and I'm not certain about this. Like, look, I wouldn't right now go short any of the, like, Anthropic filed yesterday. This is going to date the pod, but Anthropic filed confidentially yesterday. SpaceX is going out soon. Like, I can get short if I want to. I'm not going to do that because I think that's stupid, and I have no point of view on timing here. But it's not obvious to me that the independent labs businesses will basically never be able to get profitable, and eventually the ultimate winners are going to be housed within, you know, within like the current Mag 7 businesses, and, you know, and like Meta Superintelligence and, you know, Google DeepMind and whatever will just wind up winning because they have these other, like they can make money in other ways. And so like if you told me fast forward 10 years from now that like the labs sort of wound up getting either de facto or literally like acquired into much bigger tech companies, I think that would be a sort of seismic event, but it wouldn't necessarily be a shocking event.
Completely. We came up in a time when tech was compelling from an investment perspective because the businesses were asset light and free cash flow generative. And now apparently that just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I'm down to roll with it.
Yeah.
I'd like to briefly pivot now to how you're investing around AI. And obviously Persona works in fraud and compliance.
Yeah.
So to the extent you have any overlays.
Yeah, no, I do. So I think probably the most interesting, look, there are some relatively more kind of like AGI pilled bets in the portfolio, and I think that's like reasonable and makes sense. But by and large, the things that I've been kind of more focused on are like the second order impacts, where like I don't necessarily want to take that strong a point of view on like how, scaling works over the next 2 years. I don't know. But I think it's pretty obvious that there are certain knock-on effects that are already starting to emerge. Those roughly are things like enterprise environments getting a lot more complex when suddenly the kind of like you have more vendors for every use case, you have more use cases because software can do more, and the life cycle of each product and vendor gets much shorter because the technology powers it faster. So like in total, enterprise environments get more complicated. Bunch of like second order impacts of that around like things like integration platforms and consultants and system integrators. I'm very, very bullish on consultants and system integrators as a result. I think we have like this great kind of flippening happening where for the basically all of human history until now, attention has been abundant and production has been scarce. And that is very clearly changing right now, where everyone is producing huge amounts of code. Producing code is actually quite cheap and easy now. Reviewing it is extraordinarily expensive and is getting more expensive because there's like no even there's no like reason to like write things that are clean and short. And so like, okay, maybe that means the entire sort of like software development lifecycle and the way that we think about, like PRs and code review and all of that, like kind of breaks. And we're starting to see that in the problems emerging within GitHub and GitLab and, which are fundamentally problems within Git itself. Similarly, all of these systems that we have around, verification are very clearly and obviously breaking down. And so whether that is things like, how do we deal with like trust and authenticity? How do we deal with like the emergent behavior of non-human users of products and tools and the internet overall? How do we deal with like, it's basically free to do fake stuff now. And like that overwhelms, that completely overwhelms every possible, kind of prior system that we have for like trust and verification. So we are making a ton of bets in cybersecurity, identity verification, like proof of humanity. We're making a ton of bets around hiring. The same thing that the Common App did to college applications, where suddenly it became functionally free to apply to infinite colleges. And so there's no signal in applying somewhere, which makes it very hard for colleges to, hey, if you're filling out forms by hand, I know you're probably only applying to a few schools. That's a pretty high intent thing. I can afford to take seriously every application I get. When suddenly everyone applies to 25 applications or 2,500 jobs, like the systems around that don't work anymore. The same thing goes for like, for like people like to talk about the next billion users of the internet being agents, and probably it's not even billion.
Just a billion?
It's like, the next billion users of the internet this month being agents. So I do think like we are very focused, or I am principally focused within this on like the second order impacts. So not just saying how do we like how do we do more AI, but what happens after we do? Because I think we can have a lot more disagreements about the like particular path that we get there. Like, which lab wins, and can we achieve AGI through LLMs, or is there some entirely different paradigm? Like, I don't know. I don't care. Interesting academic questions. Sort of whatever happens, some of the future is actually quite clear. And it's that a lot of systems that we have in place right now aren't going to work. And a lot of assumptions that we have in our like business, culture, society, interpersonally, like just aren't going to work. So it's, I think, been interesting to try and think like 2 clicks out instead of just on the like next, like kind of fighting over the details of like the next 12 months.
It all makes sense. I completely agree. And we see this with our customers, that as the next billion, trillion, whatever number of users.
Say a bigger number, 10 trillion.
What is bigger than a trillion?
Quintillion.
Is that real? All right. You heard it here first. There's going to be a quintillion agents on the internet. But obviously, people are having to contend with who is a human, who is not. And just because it's not a human doesn't mean that it's malicious traffic.
Yeah.
But you need new paradigms now that the assumptions that previously assumed that all bot traffic was bad.
Yeah.
That's obviously not the case. And
you just get so impassioned.
I know.
About
I just like bumped the microphone.
Yeah.
Exactly. It changes. Maybe then I could just pivot it to something slightly more generic, which is, what is the consensus or the zeitgeist getting wrong about AI? Where do you feel differently than everyone else?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I said before, I'm just not convinced that the labs are great businesses. They're obviously great stocks. I'm not convinced that they're great businesses. I think there is $5 trillion of market cap that is disagreeing with me about that. Unless they're all extremely cynical traders, which maybe that's true.
Well, if I could push you, Yoni, then do you have any counter takes that you're investing into? Because you're not shorting the labs, as you just told us.
Yeah. I think maybe one thing is like, I feel like every week I see someone talking about like, this is our moat and that is our moat. Momentum is our moat, or like taste is our moat. Product is our moat, and I think that's all wrong. I think that there are 5 moats. I would really, really challenge someone to come up with a 6th. Those moats are economies of scale, network effects, brand, regulation, and IP. And I think that most businesses just don't have moats. They do not have durable competitive advantages. What they have are really good execution. And that's fine. But the best businesses have real substantial moats. Capital, also not a moat. That capital is an advantage in the same way that
That's
taste.
somewhat of a heterodox take, actually.
I just like, there are a lot of things that represent execution advantages, which are not self-sustaining, durable economic moats. And so like, your access to capital is entirely extrinsic because it relies on other people wanting to give it to you. It's actually much more about them than it is about you. So like, I think that the way that the market talks about moats is very unsophisticated and ahistorical, and overexcited. There are a lot of things that there are a lot of positive characteristics that businesses can have that don't constitute a moat. They instead constitute various forms of good execution. I always like to make this case through a counterexample, which is Google. Google has some of the most powerful economic moats in the world. It has a brand. I'm Googling it. It has economies of scale. It has network effects. It has IP. They have technology that is substantively and actually difficult to produce. The core thing of like web crawlers and indexing is not, but at this point they have a lot more than that. And then finally, arguably, they actually have a regulatory moat because of all of the things that Europe has done to make it impossible for Google. Google can pay the fines and hire the lawyers. No European search engine will ever exist and compete. So like Google arguably checks all 5 boxes. And that is why Google is an incredible, and when I say Google, I mean Alphabet or really Google, but Google is an incredible business because it has 5 real moats. You know what it doesn't have is good execution. Google has some of the worst execution of any scaled, but famously, they have a messy product roadmap. Everyone there is lazy. No one shows up to work. They're entirely unfocused. Every other day, people are like, the CEO is terrible. We gotta fire him. Oh, like they have some of the worst execution imaginable, and it doesn't matter because they actually have economic moats. They don't have momentum. They don't have taste. They don't have intuition. What they have are economic moats. They have durable, sustainable, compounding, structural competitive advantages that you cannot spend your way to get to. You can't hire your way to get there. You can't spend your way to get there. That is a difference in kind between some business. Like the counterpoint to this is like Monday.com. Monday.com has no moat. It's an application software business that is like fairly replicable, and they have to run super fast every day just to stay alive. The harder you have to work, the less of a moat you have. Startups, really early companies, do not have moats. As a rule, they do not have moats because if they had a moat, the moat would be preventing them from starting. So the wrong question is always, what's your moat? There are very, very select few examples of this where there are businesses that start either some kind of inorganic process. So like Erebor is a good example of this, where they have regulatory capture because of their proximity to the Trump administration, where they were able to just basically get waived through a, bank charter process. And like, it's fucking awesome. They can do some really cool stuff because of that blah, 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 neobank can't compete on. So like that is maybe an N of 1 example. By and large, startups don't have moats, and asking what's your moat and getting some answer about momentum and taste and judgment and blah, 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 all wrong. There's one right answer, which is we don't have a moat, but we're going to use our really, really good execution to get one over time. That is the only acceptable answer to that question. And you have to have a point of view on it early because you are planning a business over, 10 or 15 years, which means that you need to do 2 things. You need to run really, really fast always, but you need to be running really fast in the right direction. Otherwise, you run the risk of running really fast into a wall or off a cliff. So that is maybe my most heterodox take. That is actually very deeply informing how I invest, is that like we need to be asking thoughtful questions about how you build sustainable compounding structural competitive advantage, not expecting you to have one out of the gate. There are founders who enjoy those conversations and want to play out that story with me over 10 or 15 or 25 years, and are comfortable admitting and acknowledging we don't have one today. And there are people who are either not sophisticated enough as business thinkers, too insecure, or have just been given really, really bad coaching, either explicitly or implicitly, just through the way the market talks about these things. And give answers like momentum and taste, which I don't know what taste is.
You and me both.
Yeah, I certainly don't have it, but I don't know what it is.
Well, that was insanely interesting and insanely valuable. I think there's a lot that I could continue to ask you, but maybe to just wrap it up,
yeah.
I'll put it to you and say, is there anything else that you'd like to highlight, to call out about posting on X, about AI, about Slow, about investing, about you, Yoni? The floor is yours.
Look, I think it is a lot of fun to get to like pew, 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 takes and money. Honestly, I think it's sort of like hack and trite to say, but I do find I am extraordinarily grateful that I get to spend really all of my time with like super smart, passionate people about talking to them about the single thing in the entire world that they're the most smart and most passionate about. I think there is just like unlimited runway for autodidacts with crazy work ethic and weird ideas. And when I see those people, I just like sort of my heart skips a beat and I get really excited to like let's dig in and let's play this out. I believe, the firm is called Slow Ventures out of a belief that like big things take time and you can't take shortcuts. Like you don't growth hack your way to like bending reality. And I just am like super excited. Like the world right now feels in some ways really uncertain and really weird. And I'm super excited to like go do some bushwhacking with some awesome thinkers about what to do.
Where can I find you online, Yoni?
Yeah. So you can find me on Substack, 99d.substack.com. You can find me on X, the Everything app, at yrechtman. We can put that up on the screen. It's too hard to spell.
It's been a busy screen.
Yeah, it's been a busy screen. And if you find me in one place, you'll quickly find me in all the places.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you again.
Awesome, man.
And as mentioned before, if you like this, make sure to subscribe, leave your comments, and tag people that you would like to see invited to this podcast. All right. So if you want to join Persona, you go to withpersona.com/community. You can sign up for a community. If you are a startup, you can sign up on the /startups. And if you want to be in touch in general, just go to /contact. Let us know what you have in mind, and we can touch base with you. Have a good one.